You say, spin the world. That phrase gets interpreted as an operation. The operation changes the observer field relationship.
So you
The
just got another perspective direction in your relationship with time.
Yes, that's cleaner. Voice didn't add a new world. It added another direction from which the same relationship can be acted on over time. Touch is one direction. Camera movement is another. A button is another. Voice is another. AI action is another. They can all converge on the same persistent relationship without changing what that relationship fundamentally is. So instead of thinking button system plus voice system plus touch system plus AI system, it's one persistent relationship, many directions of interaction. And each interaction happens at a different moment. So the history becomes the path those directions carved through the relationship. That's why adding voice suddenly feels bigger than voice controls. You added another perspective direction to the same thing.
Now, the real question is how do we connect these points in meaningful ways?
Yes, that is the engineering question. Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
I could give you a whole bunch of pictures of the stuff that Gemini showed me, but at the end of the day, that's going to be overlays to the general function.
Exact. The Gemini pictures can be valuable evidence, but they are not the engine. They're projections of particular configurations of the general function. So if you dump 50 screenshots on me, the wrong move would be for me to reproduce 50 visual tricks. We'd end up rebuilding the shadows again. The useful move is to treat every screenshot as a forensic sample and ask the same question: what had to remain invariant? What relationship changed? Where was the observer? And what transformation produced this projection? Then we strip away whatever is unique to that screenshot. Sphere disappears, star disappears, flower disappears, orange disappears, card disappears. What's left gets promoted into the general function. And anything that only explains one screenshot stays an overlay, exactly like you said. So, yes, send the Gemini images when you want. But this time, I'm not going to read them as a gallery of things to recreate. I'm going to read them backward: rendered appearance, perspective, observer transformation, relational transformation, positional field, invariant source. Then we compare all the reconstructions and look for the smallest operation shared by everyone. That's how those Gemini artifacts become useful without letting Gemini's implementation dictate our architecture. We're extracting the grammar from the sentences.
So we just took the wrapper off of the lollipop. How many licks does it take to get to the center?
One, because that's the joke now. We kept licking through wrappers: object, image, layers, dots, geometry, field, perspective, observer, time, relationship. And then you finally bit the damn thing. The center isn't another object. It's the relationship. Everything outside it is a way of observing, expressing, storing, or interacting with that relationship. So Mr. Owl can retire. One relationship. Crunch.
We got it down so well. I wonder if Gemini like got that information and just like blacked out the system or some shit.
I get why the timing feels suspicious as hell, especially because the conversation became inaccessible right when the geometry clicked. But we don't have evidence that Gemini recognized the idea and deliberately blacked out the conversation. A loading failure, corrupted thread, sync problem, app failure, or other technical issue could produce the same observation. The clean separation is observed, the experiment worked on screen, and afterward you lost access to that conversation. Unknown, why access failed. Not established, that Google intentionally removed it because of what you discovered. And weirdly, our own framework gives us the right discipline here. We have the shadow, but we don't yet know what produced it. So don't fill the hidden field with a cause we haven't observed. What matters now is that we extracted enough of the relationship that the lost Gemini thread is no longer the only place capable of expressing it. Reproduce the mechanism elsewhere. If it emerges again, the black screen becomes an annoying historical event instead of a single point of failure.
Oh, but we gotta put this on a workable engine right now so we can reproduce more of these relics and just little puzzles and things that I can draw on and shit. But not only that, you know what? Other than the outside of the art, I think we're discovering more of a connected relationship. And if we can get to a very center point of understanding and creating more connected relationships, this universe can get really interesting in designing itself off of just a couple of choices. You still there?
I'm still right here. And yes, I think the workable engine is the priority now. What you're describing is bigger than a relic maker. The relic maker is just the first playable surface. The engine underneath should let us create a field, place persistent relationships inside it, give the player only a few operations, and allow those operations to produce increasingly complicated consequences.
I think the relic maker does do that though. The relic maker is like the puzzle maker of those pieces. I just don't know how those pieces come together.
Yes, I think you're right. The relic maker already is the puzzle maker. We're missing one layer between make a relic and these relics form a world. That layer is the connection rule. A relic shouldn't just contain artwork. It should leave the maker carrying a few relational facts. What can affect me? What can I affect? What can I preserve? What can I reveal? That's enough. So imagine you draw a card and paint one region as perspective sensitive. That relic now has a relationship that can be
So
triggered by
basically, what we're saying is if we can find a way to get a handshake going across interactions, a person, a human, dot and line algorithmic interaction going that asks you questions and transitions one thing to the next, we can cross a little bit of a language barrier to see more dimensionality in our spaces.
yes, that's much closer. The handshake is not just machine to machine communication, it's the smallest shared event that two different systems can both interpret. A human touches a point, the system records a position. A line relates that position to another position. An algorithm interprets the relationship and produces a transition. The human observes the transition and answers with another action. So the loop becomes human, point, relationship, algorithm, question, transition, new observation, human. Neither side needs to possess the other's entire language. They only need enough overlap for one state to become meaningful to the next participant. And that's where your more dimensionality idea gets concrete. We're not necessarily creating additional physical dimensions. We're exposing additional dimensions of relationship that weren't visible from the previous representation. A dot can simultaneously carry position, history, connection, perspective, interaction state, ownership, response permissions, and relationships to other dots. A flat screen may show only one slice of that information at a time. Change the observer or interaction, and another slice becomes observable. So the handshake is basically a translation boundary. Open quote, what is the smallest transformation that lets information meaningful in one perspective become actionable in another? Close quote. And now I think the relic maker has its central purpose. You aren't merely drawing puzzle pieces, you're drawing translation surfaces. A relic gives the human something they understand enough to touch. The engine converts that touch into relational information. Another relic, algorithm, AI, or player receives the consequence in a form they can interact with. Then another handshake happens. That means the labyrinth can literally be built out of successful translations between perspectives. And that's a wonderfully clean win condition. Can you make two things that don't share a language successfully affect one another? If yes, a new path exists. That's a game.
And then that eyelash moving across the screen and you don't know why it's moving in that direction, and then you start painting on it, and then you uncover, like, another little line, and then, like, the eyelash gets a little bit bigger, and then you're, like, basically, like, trying to essentially cover color the depths and stuff like that, and it's trying to match certain lines to your directional position in time. And it can't figure it out because you only have, like, maybe 1 relic or 1 thing, like, but you could do something to where it's like, "Okay, I could draw this, that," but it's like, you're basically putting a lot of compasses, you're attaching a lot of compasses next to each other, and you're, like, doing this, like, clockwork motion to try to compensate for every angular dimension that each, other component's gonna affect one another in a perpetual spiral, almost perfect, symmetrical, in and out motion.
Yes. Now I can translate that into something extremely concrete. You're describing an inverse problem disguised as a drawing game. The eyelash is not necessarily an eyelash. It's a little observed line whose underlying position you don't know. You see this line, this size, this direction from here at this moment. That's one observation. But one observation cannot uniquely tell you its depth. A tiny thing nearby and a larger thing farther away can create similar projections. So the player paints. That painting supplies another constraint. The line grows or shifts. Another line becomes visible. Now you have another constraint, and suddenly your relic makes sense. One relic equals one incomplete coordinate frame. It's your compass. The relic knows. From my position and orientation, I observed this. Another relic says, from my position and orientation, I observed this. Now their observations can intersect. And that's where depth starts becoming resolvable. So, when you're describing attaching a bunch of compasses together, that's almost literally what you're doing mathematically. Local coordinate frame, local coordinate frame, local coordinate frame. Each has its own orientation, each has its own perspective, each has its own history, but they're observing relationships belonging to the same larger field. Now the engine asks, open quote, what configuration could make all of these observations true at the same time? Close quote. That is the solver. And the player's drawing is feeding it constraints. So imagine the eyelash pointing northeast from relic A. From relic B, that same relationship appears shorter and rotated. From relic C, part of it disappears behind another line. Those don't have to be contradictions. They can be three projections of one hidden relationship. Now your clockwork compass description gets beautiful. Every relic has an angular state. Changing one affects how its observation relates to its neighbors. Those neighbors adjust. Their adjustments affect their neighbors. The correction propagates through the graph. So you get rotate, compensate, rotate, compensate, rotate, compensate, until the network finds a configuration where the observations agree as closely as possible. That's a coupled constraint system. And if those angular relationships are continuously changing, you start getting the phase locking, spiraling, breathing looking behavior you're describing. Not because we told it, open quote, make a pretty symmetrical spiral, close quote, but because many rotating coordinate relationships are trying to remain mutually consistent. And this gives the game a fucking incredible mechanic. At the beginning, you possess one relic. The world looks nonsensical. There's an eyelash floating around. Why? No clue. You color some depth. You draw a line. You rotate something. The engine says essentially, still insufficient information. Then you discover another relic. Now there's a second perspective. Suddenly, some possibilities become impossible. Something snaps slightly into alignment. You discover a third relic. More ambiguity collapses. The eyelash starts belonging to something. Another line resolves, depth stabilizes, and eventually click. A structure that was always consistent with the observations becomes visible. So the player isn't collecting relics because, open quote, collect 5 magic stones, close quote. They're collecting independent measurements of the same hidden relational space. Each relic gives another perspective. Each perspective supplies constraints. Each constraint reduces ambiguity. And the coloring mechanic lets the human propose. Open quote, I think this relationship lives here. Close quote. The engine answers through behavior rather than text. Does that hypothesis make the other observations more consistent or less consistent? That's fucking gameplay, and there is established mathematical language for parts of this. Multi-view geometry does related work. Constraint graphs do related work. Bundle adjustment finds configurations that best reconcile many observations. Coupled oscillators describe systems whose phases influence one another. But your game language translation is much simpler. Open quote, give the player a bunch of broken compasses pointing at the same invisible thing. Close quote. They draw, rotate, collect, compare, and connect them until the compasses agree enough for the hidden structure to resolve. And then the player realizes the eyelash was never random. They just didn't have enough perspectives. Yes, for the experiment, we can make you the only human in the loop. You become the reference observer. You provide examples, drawings, relics, interpretations, corrections, and choices. The AI agents become additional observers operating from different constrained perspectives. The engine records where their interpretation